Welcome to another edition of the 1% Better podcast with your host, Rob O'Donoghue.
Hello folks, welcome to another episode of 1% Better, and this one I am hoping to help you from a financial perspective. Not me per se, but my guest is going to hopefully help you think about your finances differently and potentially with the ultimate goal of becoming financially free or have freedom from your financial worries and set yourself up pretty much nicely. And if that happens, I would absolutely be happy if you put 10% of all those earnings and savings towards this podcast. But let's see how it goes. His name is Michael Houghton and he is on the line. So Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob, for having me.
Very good. Looking forward to hearing your story. I said that the whole time, but selfishly want to learn how to become a better investor, how to certainly save and, you know, live my dream life in the near future potentially.
Yeah, no, it sounds good, and I think a lot of people are wanting that, and for many, it's just a matter of changing spending habits and starting to think about putting money away now, so that in the future you'll have more available, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a universal theme that people want to be financially safe and secure, and obviously, if they can retire early and live their best life, that's going to be good. So hopefully, we'll dig into some of that. I guess it's something though, as I said, everybody wants. So you've always wanted this? Is it something that's just more recently become a realistic goal for you?
You know what, Rob? It actually started because of the tax system in Ireland, right? So I have a corporation and I've always been a freelance web developer. And when I moved here in 2011 from New Zealand, and when I finally got my Irish company set up, I started taking wages out of the company. And when I found out that when you get to a certain cap that you're paying 50% tax, that was just really hard for me to swallow, because in New Zealand, the top tax rate's about 30% on a lot higher than it would be here. So it very much became a case of, well, what am I going to do with all this money that's sitting in the company? I don't want to take it out. I can leave it in the company at being far more tax efficient. And so I started to look at ways of actually, I guess, living more frugally, because we couldn't take out as much money as we wanted, but also investing the difference within the company.
Very, very interesting. So you said it's a lot different in New Zealand. That's obviously where you're originally from. When you arrived here, just before you came in 2011, what was your career? Web development? I know you've done entrepreneur for a while.
Yeah, correct. I mean, I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but at the core of it, I've always been selling my time for money, right? And what I mean by that is I've been basically charging an hourly rate as a web developer. And, you know, kind of one of the things that always got to me is, and a lot of people are in the situation, I'm earning a lot more money now than I was, say, in my 20s. I'm 35 now. Yet for many years and up until recently, it didn't seem to make a difference. Come Christmas time, you start thinking about New Year's resolutions and things like that. And, I didn't have any more money than I did. I was earning a lot more, maybe 3 times as much as I was, 10 years previous. But there didn't seem to be any sort of left over. And that was kind of the thought pattern around what am I doing wrong? Why am I earning more money, but I don't seem to have any more? If anything, it felt like I had less. So, that was kind of some of the stuff. And we really started looking at a lot of our spending habits as a family. I've got 3 young boys. We live in a village called Castle Connell in County Limerick. And we just started to kind of look at some of the habits that we had. Would kind of go shopping each week and not really think about how much money we were spending, or, find yourself going grocery shopping 3 times a week and not really looking at what you're putting in the basket. So we just sort of started to look at that side of it. And it was very much this case of, we kind of realized that if we could cut down our expenses, start investing some money that actually produced cash flow, that I wouldn't have to work such long hours.
So it does come down to, I think, just exactly that, being deliberate and really starting to look at your daily, weekly, monthly expenditure. And it's probably something none of us ever do. I think the last time I might have done it was when I was looking for a top up for my mortgage, right? So you actually have to produce that report back to the bank so that they can give you money and charge you ridiculous interest on it. But so what was the approach you took to be that deliberate about it? Maybe just talk us through a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we basically started tracking our expenses. This was the first thing, and this is the first advice that I'd give to anybody that is even remotely interested in starting the path or the journey to financial independence is start having an idea of where your money actually goes. And we basically have various categories that we just put money, we categorize money into. And the weird thing was, after a month of doing that, you'd kind of sit down and look at the numbers, and you'd realize just how much money is being wasted on things that actually bring no happiness, right? And so we kind of had this, I guess me and my wife made this deal that anything that we bought, it had to be related to our happiness, either our happiness or giving ourselves more time, right? So that was kind of the key to this stuff. And that was kind of the big realization. We just realized just how much money, at least 20 or 30% of our money was being spent on stuff that just brought no joy to us, and it was just, we could easily cut it out and have a better life for it.
So did you literally have kind of a table of stuff you were spending on and in a column happiness index against it or something like that?
Yeah, that's a good way to think of it. But yeah, I mean, these days you spend so much, we're not really using cash that much. So it's actually quite easy to go back, pull up a bank statement or a credit card statement and just go through Excel and almost line by line go through it and just, pick a month and just see where it's all going.
Very, very good. So once you started doing that, you saw the potential for what you were saving, and then was your strategy or approach to reinvest that, to look to put that somewhere else that can give you a guaranteed or higher chance of return on investment?
Yeah, so I mean, look, obviously with investing, there's no guarantee, and the investing side's been a massive learning curve, right? So that's I've made many a mistake, and look, I think anybody that's going to go into the investing world is going to go through that to a degree. But in the end, these days, I've kind of settled on peer-to-peer lending. So that's where you basically invest your money in a platform, and that's given out as sort of loans across Europe or in Ireland as well. And that can be quite good. I typically get 12% annual return on that, which comes in about 1% a month. So if I have 10,000 with a platform, I might be getting 100 euros in interest. And various other things, the share market, Christmas trees, right? So I've got a Christmas tree investment in the UK, a little bit of Forex trading as well. I invest with some traders that trade on my behalf. So various things, but it's not even that, Rob. There's other ways that you can invest your money. So like I've started some side businesses now and put my own money into that to try and look to get some sort of return on investment in the long run. And it's not even so much about the investing side necessarily. I think as much as anything, it's just about kind of building a lifestyle. And I kind of mentioned earlier that when we cut down our expenses, I've been able to cut down on my hours as a freelance web developer. So I'm only working part-time these days as a freelance web developer, and it's allowed me to have the time to kind of see opportunities and take other opportunities that I may not otherwise have the time for.
Definitely want to ask a little bit more about that in a second, but just come back to the peer-to-peer lending and that, looking at your website, which is nicely put together, and I know you're very transparent with what you're investing and how much you're making on your portfolio page. Yes. I've seen huge growth in your peer-to-peer over the course of this year, the 6 months or so. And I think I looked into peer-to-peer a few years ago, just a kind of cursory look, and I found it quite difficult to even get signed up and be allowed to do it. Maybe at the time there was not as many sites or platforms out of Ireland that you could use. So maybe talk to me a bit about that, how that's a viable option. And again, I thought there was a lot of potential risk around it. Maybe explain a bit more about how that works.
Yeah, so I mean, on the risk side, it is an unregulated investment, right? So you've got the Central Bank of Ireland, and something like if you go and buy shares or something that's at least regulated, so there's some sort of watchdog over it. And in the peer-to-peer space at the moment, there isn't. Now, the biggest peer-to-peer lender in Europe, which is Mintos, which is where I'd have the majority of my money with, that's mintos.com, they are actively pushing for regulation. And the way that they kind of work is they don't actually take the loans out themselves. They work with other loan originators in various countries in Eastern Europe and actually in Asia now, and even parts of Africa. And effectively, you're kind of distributing the money to those loan originators, and then that's distributed then to the loans. And typically, you're never putting a loan of more than 10 euros per loan, right? So you kind of diversify as much as you can. And Mintos also offers what's called a buyback guarantee, or a lot of the loan lenders do offer a buyback guarantee. That basically means that in the event of a default on that loan, the loan company will actually at least guarantee the principal, so you get your original €10 back.
Okay, that definitely is one I plan to look into, because I think that the concern is you hear about it, you might think it's completely unsafe and huge volatility and lots of risk, which I'm sure there is. Yes. But as you said, if there's some sort of guarantee to match your principal in some instances, that's a bit more attractive. And is there any recommendations on that for how long you would leave your funds in, and do you kind of tie it up for 6 months on certain areas or durations that they're lock-in periods?
Yeah, so most loans would be under a year. So ideally you want to be having those ones, because the trouble of going longer than that is you don't know what's going to happen, right? And in many ways, the peer-to-peer lending, it hasn't had a recession to test against it. Most peer-to-peer lending sites came up after the last recession. So we don't know what impact would happen if there was suddenly a kind of a big recession come along, and what sort of pullback that might have. But I think the main thing is, Rob, you've got to diversify, right? So you never put such amount in one platform or one single investment that if it went bust or went bad, that you would be badly off. So like even in the case of my portfolio, yes, around 45% is within peer-to-peer lending, but that's divided amongst 10 platforms. So the risk is kind of limited from that point of view. Even if one went bust, it might only be 5 or 10% in my overall portfolio gone.
So it sounds like there's a lot of time invested in managing all of these different investments, I suppose. Is that fair to say? Like how long do you spend doing that? Obviously it must be a return on investment. It sounds like you're making calculated decisions around this. So be interested in to know, especially for folks that are coming at this from a zero starting point knowledge wise, what are the things to learn? How would they get ramped up quickly? That sort of stuff.
Yes, I mean YouTube's definitely makes things a lot easier, and you're right. I mean there certainly is a bit of time involved in actually working out the investments, but it's largely about finding your own strategy. And I think let's say you take 2 or 3 months to work the stuff out. Once the investment's actually made, then you just get to sit back and relax. So it's very much do the research once, read some reviews once, get comfortable with it once, make the investment, and then everything's on autopilot. So even in the case of peer-to-peer lending, there's a thing called auto invest. It just basically invests on the loans for you. Once one loan's paid back, it just automatically invests in a new loan for you. So it's extremely passive once everything's actually set up.
Is there a large management fees with peer-to-peer lending?
No. I'm assuming the platforms usually would just be making their margin on sort of the interest rate. So there's no direct fees. What the interest rate that you see is the interest rate that you get.
Okay. And do you have any insight into the actual person that's receiving the loan or group or whatever, as in the level of risk with them?
Yeah, correct. So in the case of Mintos, they actually will grade all of their lenders, so you can have an idea of what their grade is according to Mintos anyway. And you can also click on an individual loan, see the age of the person, see what country they're in, see the reason for the loan, see their payment history on that loan. So you kind of get a good idea of what's going on.
Interesting. You mentioned forestry or Christmas trees then. I think that's something I've heard other folks invest in over a while. Is that very low return over a long period of time? How does that one work?
Yeah, so this particular company, they're actually a UK based company. Originally, they've also got a company in Ireland. They're called Walker Forestry. And they basically have just been growing the Christmas trees. They take 5 years to grow. I think I own around 17,500 of them in Birmingham somewhere. And it's a 5-year investment. The return I'm getting on that is around 15% per year. But I don't see any of that money until the 5 years is up. So there is certainly a risk in that from that point of view. But if it does pay off, then it will be a good return.
And just on that one, the risk of the 15%, what are the risk factors within not hitting that? Is it just the, I suppose, climate and just fires? Or
no, So the trees themselves are insured, so that side of it's okay. I would say the risk would be if the company went bust or insolvent. or if there was just some, they were running a scam or whatever. But, again, you do all the research you can. There's no guarantees, of course, but you try and do all the research you can. And you're dealing with a UK and Irish company. So from that point of view, it's a little bit more safe than investing in something offshore. But at the same time, there's no guarantee. But to be honest, Rob, the way you've got to look at it is that when you make that investment, like if you're so tied to the money, you're not going to be able to invest. The way that I would invest is I see it as an expense, right? So I talked about earlier that we cut down on buying things. Mm-hmm. We still buy things. We now just buy investments instead. Okay. So it's very much a case of you buy it and you almost in your own mind, you think of the money being gone. And when it comes back then that's obviously a bonus. And in the case of, like, let's say peer-to-peer lending, what I'm really buying is that monthly cash coming in. That's ultimately what I'm wanting to see and what I'm interested in getting back.
And it's paid out monthly effectively there with that.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so I could effectively, I do in some cases just withdraw that each month, and that's just a little bit of cash flow coming in for us then.
Interesting. So you mentioned the whole idea of compound interest and how important that is. I think that's something on one of the other episodes I talked about around finance, that certainly came to the fore. Can you explain a little bit more about that? And is that, underlying everything you do? Do you see the compound interest as a kind of a fundamental for your investments?
Totally. I mean, the ability to reinvest and just keep investing is really at the core. And that's ultimately what's going to actually replace your earned income. So that's really what we're trying to do is we're, at the moment, most people would be earning money through selling their time. We're trying to reduce the amount of time that, or earned income, if you like, and replace it with that passive income. And to get that growth, you need that compounding effect for sure.
So do you have a long-term plan laid out? At what point? You said you're 35 now. How many years do you feel it'll take before you're kind of at that point of inflection where maybe you're not working, quote unquote, doing, getting paid for your time, and it's you're just sitting back and the passive income is coming in? Do you have a plan or a target?
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned that. I actually didn't. So just for the listeners, I've started my own podcast on a lot of this stuff. And I did one particular episode where I actually calculated how long it would take. And at the moment, we typically save €3,000 a month, or we're investing €3,000 a month. And it actually was going to be 11 and a half years of doing that for us to have a pot of about 600,000, which would give us enough to actually live off our investments. And the conclusion that I've kind of come to is, for me, the investing side is largely plan B, right? So I'm going to keep doing that. But at the same time, particularly because I've freed up my time, it's allowed me now to work on building business systems and scalable businesses and things that can actually potentially get me there faster, I guess.
Very interesting. You'll still be a young man in 11 years' time when you get to that stage. So maybe talk to me a little bit more about, I suppose, some of the other areas that you're really looking at that we didn't touch on in the kind of overall picture, the other parts of your strategy maybe.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the big things that we do, which would differ from most people, is, we probably haven't touched on it yet, Rob. One of the reasons why I'm not hoping it takes 11 years is because it's hard. It's really, really, really difficult. I mean, we do budget every single day. We live off a single income, under the tax cutoff rate. So it is a real struggle for us on a day-to-day basis to make sure that we, get through each month. Now, obviously, it's a different sort of struggle. It's a forced struggle that we're making ourselves have. But one of the things that we do is like, we used to track our expenses, but now we actually have a very specific budget that we do. And we basically allocate all our money into various categories. So you might have your car costs, your bills, your mortgage, your food costs, entertainment. Basically have all of these various categories. And we take our sort of monthly income and we allocate that to each of those various categories. And then we just budget off that. So let's say we put €800 a month into our food. We basically make sure that we live off that each month. Now, food can be a little bit harder, but some other examples might be a clothing budget that we have or an entertainment budget that we have. And we kind of micromanage all of our sort of budgeting on a day-to-day basis. So from that point of view, it is difficult, but it's really the only way at this stage to kind of allow us to get through.
Well, it strikes me, you mentioned how difficult it is, and I guess some of the stuff I do advocate for is try to live in the now as opposed to maybe live further down the road. So is there, does that cause any conflict? Is there challenges, when you're trying to debate over how much to allocate for this pot for the month? And I suppose, how do you obviously all have to be bought into this, and
yes,
how do you
very
deal
much
with
so.
any of that sort of conflict that might come up?
Yeah, so there are times where, and look, the budgeting side is very difficult. Like it's like Parliament when we try and get the budget to balance. But the thing is, time freedom is, for me, and I think for our family as well, freedom is the best and the ultimate thing. And there's many a time, we might say to my wife, and I might say, look, do you just want me to go back and work full time? We could just ramp this up and pay more tax on our income, and not have to deal with this. But then the upside is you've got all this time freedom, right? So we don't set alarms anymore when we get up, and we don't have to worry too much. I do 3 hours, 4 hours work a day in my own time. If we want to go out for a bit, or my wife wants to go to have a sleep during the day, or if I want to have a sleep during the day, then we take one. And so we are kind of living in the now from that point of view.
Sure.
We rather than worrying about the money side, we get the time side, but we're also putting all of this money into our investments. So it's very much a case where, yes, we are living hard on the finance side, but we have time freedom, and we appreciate that so much. That going back to the old way, the way we used to, it just seems like a bridge too far now.
No, I think you've explained it very well, and myself included, even though I do try to meditate and get up early to allow myself to work on certain things that I really enjoy and have more time in the day, less sleep, so more specifically more time to do things and be present. It's still, you're still going to the day job, you're still earning X to pay X plus Y, and there's that level of striving, and we are still also looking forward to a retirement or whatever that might be, but still balancing things in the now. So I can definitely get a hint of that feeling of being on vacation for a week and having the choice to do whatever you want to do, and still, if you still can work a few hours a day to keep things rolling in, it sounds blissful. And I can certainly see if you have that opportunity and you start living to that and getting by and being able to do all those things with your kids and your family, that's obviously, experiences are more valuable than any money in the bank, right?
100%. 100%. I think the other thing too, Rob, in many ways I've been fortunate because I've been a freelancer, and you kind of see it that I'm no less productive in 4 hours than I would be in 8. I've made myself more productive. I've got better at my craft. And so in many ways, I've kind of challenged that 8-hour day. That, to be honest, when I cut down to part-time, it was last September I cut down, it was actually getting over the mindset of not being an 8-hour worker anymore. And at first it was very difficult. It didn't make sense to me. But once I did it and I realized, it worked, it's been great. And I don't suffer burnout anymore. I don't feel the need to go on holiday every 3 months like I used to. My brain isn't exhausted. And, the actual work that I do when I do my freelancing work is extremely productive because I'm not feeling tired. I'm not making mistakes.
Maybe talk a little bit about productivity. It is an area that I'm passionate about. I did a podcast about it a couple of years ago. I'm actually writing another post and going to do another solo show about it because my views on productivity have changed a little over the last couple of years, and I'd be interested to just hear certain things you do to be productive.
Yeah, so I mean, as a programmer, I've always been extremely efficient, right? So I always kind of had that side of it. And it's a weird business to be in because there's not many businesses where, or at least industries where, you're paying for somebody's time, but what you're wanting is actually the outcome.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that realization that I kept putting my hourly rate up, and you get pushback from clients. And even though I might be 10 times faster than, say, a program in the subcontinent, they didn't get that. It didn't make sense. So I actually moved away altogether from billing time and got that notion away and just started billing like your local plumber would, right? You've got a job, this is how much it's going to be. The client doesn't care how long it takes,
right, as
long as the job's done and the quality is good. And when I shifted from that mindset, I basically shifted from selling my time to working on I need to earn X per day. So when I go to work in the morning, I'm going to bill X euros per day. And hey, if it gets to 12 o'clock and I'm done, great. My job is done and my client is happy, right? And I'm getting paid well for my experience and my efficiency.
Do you see that model? And I totally get it as well. I was just talking to a friend of mine last week about, in some ways, I would love to be able to write code and dive into that sort of work. My brain doesn't work that way, unfortunately. But I guess sitting at your desk and being passionate about what your output is going to be seems exciting, and it's maybe somewhat solitary, but that's okay as well. If you are working on your own. But is there other ways you think, instead of bill by the hour, bill by the output, could be something attractive in other roles? Is that something you've thought about?
Totally. Totally. Look, the freelancing is becoming more and more mainstream now, and the push towards this, we're going to be seeing, and I think we're going to be seeing more and more of this. And it's one of those things that, like I talked about, cutting down from 8 to 4 hours. At first, it seemed crazy. I was like, oh, wow, is this going to be okay to do? But the funny thing is, my clients are happier now, because when I send them an invoice, I'm not sending them an invoice for 60 hours work. I'm giving them a list of every task that's been done with a price next to it, and they can actually see the value. So I think, there's certainly opportunities for people, if you are in a job at the moment and, you've been thinking, you are good at your work and you do produce value, then certainly there's ways to set up businesses and just try to look to do that. And look, I'm not alone. That's what consultants are doing. But there's many people actually moving to this model. It's for me, it's been life changing. I think we get so caught up on time and clock watching and being in a certain place at a certain time, and when you remove that stress, life is just so much easier. I no longer stress about it. Like, the work's going to get done at some point. It's almost a case now where my lifestyle is first and then my work is second. And that's quite a dramatic change. So, you asked earlier how long it's going to take. In many ways, I call it a journey, but I'm kind of already living it to a degree. And yes, it's not complete financial freedom. It's casual, semi-financial freedom at the moment. But at the same time, I get to work with the clients I like, that I get to work with, and I like the work. So from that point of view, it's great. If I was fully financially independent, would I stop being a programmer? Probably not. So it'd be almost exactly the same as it is now. So, from that point of view, I am living in the now. It's sort of this situation where I wanted to structure my life around what I saw retirement being. And that's kind of an interesting concept, because I think for a lot of people, might be in their 60s, they've got this big retirement sort of, it's almost like this big day. You're going to go from working 40 hours plus to nothing. That's going to be hard. That is going to be hard. And so I really wanted to transition into it slowly but surely. And that's kind of, been how I've done it. And look, the business side, I've started some side hustles and doing various things. That's interesting to me. That's not the escape necessarily. I just feel almost obligated to do it. And, you kind of, when you're not tied up all the time, you've actually got time to do stuff. Most people can't do something because they don't have the time. They see the opportunity, but they don't have the time. And I kind of feel like, right, somebody will come to me with a great idea, and I'll say, look, I can do that. I've got the time to do that. Let's explore it. So from that point of view, it's just fun, I think.
Yeah. I think what's changing for me, as we kind of talked through this, and before we started, and how I would have advertised or promoted this, would be around the financial freedom. And what imagery comes up for me and people there is that you hit 65 or 70, you get your big pot of money, and then you can, play bad golf and go on cruises or whatever for the last X amount of years of your life, hopefully 20 or 30 or more. But it's not really that at all, I think. What you're advocating, it's in lots of ways, love what you do, get paid for that high quality work now, and be kind of almost in that semi-retired state for forever, but still keep working, because I there's certain things I love to do, and I'd love to be getting paid for them, and I wouldn't in any way probably want to stop doing that beyond a certain point, so it's trying to flip the mindset from the old traditional 40 years of work to maybe earlier in your career start balancing it out, and maybe do your 50% work, 50% having more time with your family, and go longer and just kind of keep those kind of balanced kind of views along the way, if I'm kind of making sense there.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'll give you an example, Rob. So one of the things that I did when I went part-time is I set up a hockey coaching business, right? So I play hockey and my children play hockey. And I set that business up for the sole reason that I wanted to be able to coach my kids more and actually, play hockey with them more. And I went down and saw the school principal at the local school, bought a bottle of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc in, and, he was all for it. He said, yeah, let's do this. Got the insurance, had everything done. And, I'm coaching 30 kids down at that school now. And I've gone from being the guy that used to pick up his kid that nobody would say anything to the guy that goes down to the school and everybody says, hey, Mike, how are you? Great session the other day. And everybody knows me, right? So my wife had to go on and do some volunteering at the school. And they didn't say, oh, this is my son's wife. They said, oh, that's Michael's husband, right? Because I'm just known by everybody now. So, from that point of view, anything else aside, and that business isn't really there to make money. It's like I said, it's a hobby business. Mm-hmm. But you can actually walk down the street and people will say hello to you, and you're actually somebody of almost importance, or at least you feel like you're giving back to your community. Mm. And I think for so many of us, we're so tired, we're getting up early, we're getting back late, we don't have those opportunities. And I just think, why not take those opportunities now when my kids are young? And really, if I had the choice, all I want to do is spend as much time with them as possible.
Mm. So from a personality perspective, from a confidence perspective, how have you changed? Have you noticed a change in yourself as a result of some of these, these tweaks you've been making?
Yeah, it's interesting. People now, I had a guy, a friend of my son knock at the door today. He actually came unannounced, and he came in and he just asked me about a business that he wanted to set up. And, I've got a neighbor who's also setting up a business, and, she's trying to get into that. And so I'm finding more and more people are coming to me now. And it's not like I'm advertising the fact that I'm doing this stuff. I try to keep it as low profile as possible. But of course, Irish people talk and word kind of spreads. So from that point of view, I want to talk about this stuff. I love talking about this stuff. I think everybody should be doing this to some degree, right? I think the kind of the other way of living, of that sort of let's just keep buying and the work spend, kind of stuck in the rat race, we have to go to work because we've got to pay off our debts life, is one that needs to change for most people. And if I can talk to people about this, if I can help them on their businesses, if I can provide advice with the tax system and so on, one of the biggest injustices, and we talked about this at the start, for me, is you've got a corporate tax rate of 12.5%, yet an upper personal tax rate of 50%. You've got a 40% difference in the tax rate. It's just, people should be on the streets, but of course, most people don't even know or aren't aware of it. So, or at least don't know how they could take advantage of it.
And maybe just from a tactical perspective, a practical point of view, what are ways they could take advantage just of that? Not to be completely handing over everything to the tax man per se. Yes. Is there anything specific that anyone starting out that they could make them aware of that they should look to apply?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, if you've got a PAYE job, there's really nothing much you can do about that. But the best advice I would give is start a company, start a business of some sort. The cost of living in New Zealand, Rob, is so expensive that almost everybody I know in New Zealand has a side business just to make enough money to live. The cost of living there is close to double what it is in Ireland. So, you can form a company in Ireland now for €100, right? It's pretty cheap. And then any money that company earns, in most cases, is going to be taxed at 12.5%. The idea would be to leave the money in the company, so don't actually pay yourself out. Keep, get your wages through your job. Keep any other money that the business makes in the company, and then you've got a few options. You could start a pension within that, right? So company pensions in Ireland are fantastic. The amount of money that you can put into a pension through a company as a company director is scandalous compared to what you can put in as a PAYE earner. Or alternatively, just keep it in there, invest it through that company, extremely tax efficient doing it that way, right? Or just keep it as cash, and when you retire, you can then just keep drawing that down through wages.
Definitely a good idea. And obviously, you can create that company. You don't actually have. There's no lower limit to what you actually have to generate revenue wise in a year? Is there, like, you can just be making a loss every year, whatever that might be, to pay your accountant,
Correct.
but ultimately adding, can you be putting in capital to that on a yearly basis?
Yes.
As I said, just adding it in and just adding
so you
it to
can you can loan yourself the money. You need to be seen to be doing a trade, right? So there needs to be some sort of trade happening, right? So you can't just like almost do a Facebook and have no kind of income for years and years and years, or at least you'd have to justify that, I suspect. But like let's just assume that, I mean, let's take me as a freelance developer. Let's say you're a graphic designer or something like that as your job. You set up a company, you do a little bit of freelance work, you find clients through LinkedIn. You invoice the company through that. If your income's low enough, you wouldn't even have to worry about that, right? Or if you're getting overseas clients, you don't have to worry about that. Great. And then you kind of just have the money coming in that way. And yeah, look, there are additional expenses, right? So there's obviously accountants that you have to go and see. But a lot of accountants will do a tax return, relatively cheap.
Yeah. No, interesting. And probably from talking to those people that are asking you these sort of questions, the idea of setting up a company is a huge deal for them, and it just seems the barrier for entry of all of that probably is too big of a deal. But when you break it down and make it clear, and I suppose develop their attitude to risk or understanding, it probably makes it a lot more simple.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, look, even when I first got here in 2011, the company I set up was a lot more expensive. But these days, there's services that'll do it for €100. The company actually get that money back as well through the company, right? Once it's established, so the company actually pays for that formation. But it's very much a different mindset. I mean, the biggest advantage of having a corporation, there's a couple of advantages, but a few of the biggest ones are obviously, you get your income and then you deduct your expenses, and you only pay tax on your profit, right? So if you've got a job, you've got to pay to get there, right? From your salary, you don't get to deduct that, right? Whereas with a company, you get travel, you get mileage, you get to if you're based out at home, you get deductions back from your internet connection, your mobile phone bill, percentage of your electricity. If you're renting, a percentage of your rent, right? So all of these things are deductions, and then you're only paying tax on the profit. And then the other thing is, Rob, you're not paying that tax until September next year, right?
Yeah.
So
with and do something.
Yeah, exactly. You can just let it be there to help you with cash flow management, if nothing else, right? Obviously, be aware that is going to have to be paid at some point, and we see so many companies go out of business because they don't account for that. So be responsible, but at the same time, it is a huge advantage that you can take advantage of.
Yeah, agreed. And I think people just, again, going back to, not speaking on behalf of everybody, but it's like, it's probably too much hassle. I won't bother doing it. I don't know what I'm doing. And it's that, it's just not for me sort of mentality. So I think by listening to you and you explaining it, there's obviously resources online. People can, get in touch with you, and we'll share some of those details later. But I guess the encouraging element of what we're trying to get across is anyone can do this, even if it is just something simple as an aside on top of your day job, to allow you to make a few extra euros, and then to look at investing it in somewhere or another. It shouldn't just be not for me as an answer,
Yeah, and to be honest, Rob, look, you're right. It does seem scary at first, but once you do it and you start going down that road, it's really not. It's a series of steps. A company is nothing more than a piece of paper, right? So it's not that scary, and it just I don't know. I mean, it just gives you more options, and the business aside, like the legal setup aside, having a business is a great feeling to have. It's great seeing a business grow, and dealing with new customers, and being able to fire a customer if you want, right? So you've just got so much more sort of freedom and control over the type of work you do.
Yeah, those are the two words I was probably going to say back to you. Freedom and control, I think, are two words I would say that I've seen pop up the most through nearly. It's weird, over the last few episodes I've started to see kind of patterns jumping out, and just stepping back and reflecting from all the episodes I've done. And freedom and control are the probably two words closely aligned when I talk to entrepreneurs. And there's always a very clear sense of I suppose you knowing what you're doing and confidence, I suppose, when you talk about how you run a business, and those two things, values, I suppose, are the ones that jump out very prominently along the way. In the area of kind of being influenced by others that have inspired you to do this, have you taken learnings from many that have helped you along your journey?
Hugely, Rob. Look, none of this is my ideas, right? This is just stuff that I've learned along the way and obviously adapted. But probably the biggest one is Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad, bestseller in 1997. But it's a very 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 easy read, that book. But that kind of gets things going. There's a few guys on YouTube that you can follow. There's a guy called Dan Locke that talks about this stuff. Tony Robbins is another one that talks about taking control of your money and setting up a freedom fund, he calls it. So there's so many. There is a lot of resources on it. I think for me, doing the podcast on this is nice because it's an Irish context, and a lot of the guys that have become financially independent are mainly based in the US. But there is, look, it's great, and I would spend easily an hour a day, Rob, learning and keep learning and watching videos, listening to podcasts on this stuff. There is a constant learning curve, but that's part of the fun. That's part of the personal development journey, I guess.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting with your site and the transparency of the portfolio piece, I've seen other, I guess, podcasters that have done something similar. I don't know if you listen to John Lee Dumas. He has his own website and obviously podcasts. I think he has over 2,000 episodes, but he has an earnings kind of counter on his front page on a monthly basis, how much millions he's earned over the last number of years, which was interesting. I interviewed him last year and just asked him why, and it's not about showing off, it's about just being transparent, and said, look, this is the truth. You hear and see a lot of these kind of quote unquote coaches or multimillionaire consultants, and it seems like a lot of spin and kind of pyramid schemes and just trying to lure people in. But when you do it transparently and it's fact based, data driven, it certainly has more credibility. I guess that's the same motivations you're using there.
A little bit. To be honest, Rob, though, I figure if I put it online and publish it, it's going to make me not give up on it, right? That's probably my big drive. I mean, my portfolio now is just under 65,000. It's a long way off where it needs to be in terms of full financial independence. And, it might seem a lot, but it's still tiny in comparison to where it needs to be. But at the same time, it makes sure that I keep going on this and keep pushing and keep developing and learning and have that accountability, I guess. I think if you publish your goals, you're going to be that much more likely to actually achieve them.
Yeah, I agree. I gave up alcohol in 2018 and I kind of wrote about it on a regular basis and I still haven't gone back to it. So I think that absolutely helps. But you started, your portfolio started at 40 grand, was it?
No, that was last year. So I mean, my portfolio started at really zero. So my first major investment was only May last year. So I spent a good year tracking expenses, learning about investing, putting myself in a position to actually have the money, because there was very much a mindset shift, and it was very much hand in hand. I had to change the way that I was billing. So that I could actually earn more money. So the first thing was, obviously, it's not just like I'm going to pull the money out of thin air. It was very much a combined effort of reducing expenses, reducing the amount of money that we were taking out of our company, but also increasing the amount of money that I was earning. So that's actually more hard than the investing side, right? So getting to that stage was actually the most difficult part. Once we had that, then by that stage, been looking at investments for 6 months or more. I had an idea of where to start. And just literally started putting 3,000 a month in, and I've been doing that now for the last 18 months.
Okay, so it's something if you were advising somebody, spend a number of months kind of researching, planning, setting your kind of boundaries or guardrails to what's feasible, what's realistic for you. It's like kind of having a smart goal in some ways, I suppose, and at a point in the future, set your target date to say, right, from this point on, now we feel comfortable enough to take that first step, and then start kind of tracking towards it. I guess I'm asking you that question. I'm just talking it out as I mean,
you've got to be comfortable with your investments for starters, right? Like, I could tell you to invest in something, and unless you're comfortable in it, you've ultimately got to be the one that's comfortable, in investing in it. So it's very much a case of doing the research, working out your plan, your journey, how you want to actually do this. A lot of people just say just buy the S&P 500 index fund, which again, that's a great strategy, right? So find your strategy. It's almost like thinking if you won the lotto, right? That's how I kind of looked at it. I said, if I won the lottery today, what would I do with the money, right? And you could almost have your sort of, dummy investment portfolio based on that. Let's take 50 grand and work out where I put it, right? And then work backwards from there, right? I know you had Paddy Delaney on the show recently. He was saying the same thing. Begin with the end goal in mind, right? So it's very much a case of you've got this vision, you've got this goal. Yes, you don't know how you're going to get there yet, right? But it all starts one step at a time. And, it's financial independence is one of these things where, if I sat there and went, geez, I need 600 grand in a portfolio to be financially independent, that's going to take me a lifetime. You would never start. But if you actually just start by going, look, let's get on top of our expenses. Let's start living within our means as the first thing. And then, right, let's get some extra money in. And then, right, what are we going to do with that extra money? Work that out. And then go, right, how can we get more money in? And just work on it from that point of view, literally looking at it 1 month at a time. Then it starts to become a lot more easy. If you had told me 18 months ago I'm going to have an investment portfolio of 65 grand in 18 months, I would have laughed at you. But you just literally go 1 month at a time.
Yeah. And one or two probably examples might jump into mind to kind of help people figure out what that goal might be. So obviously the biggest investment people make is in their home, so they tend to have a large mortgage, and they say, I'd love to be mortgage free by a certain point in time. Is that a good example of their starting with the end in mind and then kind of working back?
Yeah, so it's interesting you mentioned that, Rob. I've got a little bit of a different take on the whole house thing, right? And it comes a little bit back from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And Robert Kiyosaki says your house isn't an asset, it's actually your greatest liability, right? So we were very fortunate that we bought a house in 2013 off Nama, and we got a steal. We really did get a steal. Very it was just jealous. A concrete shell. Yeah, it was just a concrete shell when we bought it. But to be honest, we a year or so ago we were looking at upgrading our house, and it was exactly that trade-off. It was, yes, we can get the bigger house, but it's going to mean me working longer. And in the end, we decided, no, we're just going to stay where we are. So, back to that sort of struggle, we do. We're a family of five in a 3-bedroom semi-D, right? The small ones. But having me at home is more important. So, and even on the mortgage, come on, interest rates are 2.75%. That's less than inflation, really, right? Mm-hmm. So, from my point of view, I'm not worried about the mortgage. I'd much rather invest the difference. And, ultimately, in many ways, we are mortgage free now because our passive income pays for our mortgage, right? So our mortgage isn't really a worry because we have that passive income covering it anyway. So it's a little bit of a different mindset. And will we get a bigger house one day? Yeah, maybe. But we will pay for that from our investments, or we will potentially rent this house out that we have now to then upgrade to a bigger house and have the rental income from this house pay for the mortgage on the new house. So there's various ways. It's called house hacking. It's quite a big thing in the US, where you basically look to make money from your house to kind of get away with getting that bigger house. But the idea is you need to kind of work that out. It's not just a matter of going and getting a bigger house and taking a bigger mortgage. Because unless you're planning on downsizing your house or renting it out to students or something like that, maybe some bedrooms, your house isn't really an investment because it doesn't make you any money, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, there's speculation. Your house goes up in value, but you still got to live somewhere. It's not like you're going to sell it and just go live in a tent. Yeah. So it's very much, again, that I think we're kind of programmed and almost brainwashed to a large degree to get the new car, to replace your car every 3 years, to get the bigger house, to keep up with the Joneses mentality. And really what I'm trying to do, I drive an '06. It's the oldest car in the school when I do the school run. And people are now starting to realize he's actually doing that on purpose. We could buy a new car tomorrow, of course, mm-hmm. but we don't want to. Yeah. We don't want to, Yeah.
Very, very good. Yeah. So I think a takeaway there would be, and I think it's part of your strategy is that the earnings you will make off your investments, be it 5, 10, 15%, are going to far outstrip the percentage of interest you're paying on your mortgage, and it's okay to have that mindset of why couldn't I make that sort of interest. It doesn't have to be earning less than you would be paying back in interest, right?
Correct. And look, if interest rates change and they go up dramatically, then the situation might change. But at the moment, with low interest rates, even taking into account the tax that you need to pay on the investment income, it's still better than if you were actually just paying the mortgage off directly.
Very good, Michael. I think we've got a good bit out of that. I hope I certainly learned something. I always tend to learn a few bits and pieces. I've scribbled notes down furiously here, and I hope folks listening have it sparked their interest and made them think a little bit differently about how they're managing their income and obviously outgoings as well. I think there's certainly stuff in there for folks to enjoy. Let me know more about you and how folks can check out your podcast and check out your website, Playing with Fire, and just in general, maybe reach out to you if they have any ideas or questions they'd like potentially to run by you. Yeah,
so I mean, I've started the podcast really just to be able to talk more about this and not be the only guy that actually have people reach out to me that are also feeling the same way, and that's available at playingwithfire.ie. I've also just started a financial independence meetup group. That's in Limerick, and we have our first meetup on the 18th of September in the workbench for the Bank of Ireland in O'Connell Street. There's also a financial independence meetup in Dublin, which already, as I said earlier, already has members. So I'll be attending that on the 12th of September as well. But yeah, I mean, look, please, come and have a listen to my other podcasts. It's very much more of the same of what we've discussed today, and it just tells stories of my journey and what I experienced, I guess.
Very good. And are you planning on doing more interviews on the podcast? Because I know pretty much they've been solo runs so far.
Yeah, so I plan on doing an interview every 10th episode. So I actually just interviewed a guy called Vince who runs the Financial Independence Meetup in Dublin. That'll be coming out later this week. But yeah, certainly as I get more traction and I meet more people who are going down the same path as I am, absolutely, I'd love to interview more people.
Brilliant, Michael. Look, thanks for sharing your story and talking through the approaches you're applying, how you're living your life. And very much enjoyed hearing that. And best of luck. I'll keep certainly checking in on your portfolio, and the whole peer-to-peer thing is certainly an area that I'm very, very interested in. So I think it'd be worth checking that out and giving that a go, I think.
Definitely. And look, Rob, start with €50. Do you know what I mean? That's all you're going to risk, €50. See how it goes. See if it makes sense. And if it does, just add more.
Yeah, brilliant. Sounds good, Michael. Thanks a million. And we will stay in touch, I'm sure.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
No bother. Good luck. So this is the outro of the podcast, guys. You got to the end, and that is great. Please hang in here for another couple of minutes. I know most people won't, but maybe there's something here of interest. So check this out. First off, thanks so much for listening to this one, as well as maybe the 100 or so that's gone before it. Why not check them out if you haven't already? There's lots of good stuff in there. The whole podcasting journey for me has been a huge learning, and I'm trying to help you guys learn and improve as well. So much has changed over the last few years since I started it. I've really realised lots of the goals that I put out there, and then realised so many unexpected benefits as well. And I think anytime you take on action towards a goal, you're going to pick up lots of things that you didn't expect along the way, and hopefully they're good things. In this particular episode, was there any one or two things that jumped out? Maybe you could take a pen and paper out right now, because this is something that you might think of during the episode but never do. Do it now. Take it out. Write down a goal that you're going to set yourself as a result of something you learned from this episode. Put a plan in place and then work towards it, applying yourself deliberately over time. Take ownership, build a habit, improve, get 1% better, share accountability with somebody you know in a buddy system, and learn and grow and improve. That's what it's all about. That's my hopefully inspirational piece done. Other areas to note: check out the website robofthegreen.ie. You can consume everything there for free. There is obviously the podcast, there's video, 1 Minute Monday clips, there's articles, not enough, but I'd like to put more there. If you're interested in putting one there, let me know. And there's a Get Better At page, which I'm starting to add new content to over time. There's a feedback page if you want to email me, rob@robofthegreen.ie instead. But it's all about trying to engage you and get you to a place of improvement. So I'm open to feedback. As I said, ways you can help me is by following me on the socials. At robofthegreen.ie is the website, or at robofthegreen on all the social platforms. Subscribe to the podcast on any of the apps that you might listen to it on. Talk about it. Tell a friend about it. Tell your family members about it. Share some of the ideas, not only to your friends, but to me. Is there anything I can improve upon? Sign up to the newsletter. That's there as well. I'm experimenting again with a group called Slack, Rob of the Green on Slack. This is really for a shared accountability environment and sharing ideas. You can sign up to that on the website as well. All of this is obviously all free, but there is also an option where you could subscribe to my Patreon site and make a small donation for the content that we do. It's there. It's totally up to you. Everything that is coming in through that or could come in through that will go into making the podcast better. So, to close, I am always trying to improve and get better. Change is difficult, I know that, but it's all about taking the first step. Learning something, applying yourself, moving forward. You can do this. I've been able to improve, pushing myself outside the comfort zone, learning, and I think if I can do it, so can you. Don't overreach, don't set yourself unrealistic goals. 1% at a time is enough, but it's all about starting, and that will bring you on your pursuit of betterness to a great place. Thanks for sticking to the very end. Talk to you next time and take care. Good luck.